Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out today. So we started this panel to talk about that transition period between when somebody's in the music industry, whether it's in a band or other, and they're just kind of doing it because they really like it and they're making good art. And then when they transition into something to where they're actually making money and it's a lifestyle and it's what they're doing it for a career. And so I think it's just an interesting transition point. So I thought I'd put together a panel with some really interesting, amazing human beings who know what that's like, who have either experienced it themselves or have been with people who have experienced it. And yeah, so thanks for South by for having us here to talk about this today. I think first, before I start doing introductions, I'd like to just get a head count of how many people, well, not count, but maybe just see a show of hands of how many people have here are artists or other, I guess is the other category. Okay, so artists. Okay, cool. Nice. Awesome. All right, lots of artists. That is good. Okay, I guess from there, I'm just going to go ahead and introduce everybody. First of all, my name's Josiah. I'm a financial advisor and investment advisor. I work with a lot of people in music. About 70 to 80% of my clients are music industry based, so based out of Denver. And yeah, I love music, and I'm having a lot of fun. So I'll go ahead and start from there.
All right, well, my name's Scott Booker. My hobbies are collecting records and toy soldiers. And seriously, I love them, and they're great, and they're fun. I paint them, and I make little. That's not what this is about, is it?
No,
okay.
Different hobby.
Well, anyways, I manage a band called the Flaming Lips and several other bands, and I also run a music school called the Academy of Contemporary Music at the University of Central Oklahoma.
My name is Jesse Cannon. I'm a record producer and the author of a music business book called Get More Fans, the DIY Guide to the New Music Business.
My name is Joe Gittleman. I play bass in a band called the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, and I teach in a small but growing music business program at Linden State College in the lovely Northeast Kingdom of Vermont.
Love that. My name's Kristen Green. I am the head of talent at On2 Entertainment, and I'm sick. We manage the Lumineers, Hey Marseille, Fox, and Andrea Gibson.
Perfect. So the way we're going to run this panel today, I'm just going to ask a few questions. Then we'll have about 15 minutes at the end where you guys can ask some questions of everybody that's here. So while we're going through this, just keep some things in your head, and we'll go from there. So I guess the first question I'd like to start with is, what's the biggest mistake someone can make when they start gaining success in the industry? And what's the smartest thing they can do when they get to that point? So I think I'm going to start on this one just with whoever is more interested in answering it at the moment. We'll go from there. Joe, Jesse, I think you guys have mentioned.
Okay. Well, you should never assume that whatever money you see is going to be a regular occurrence, I think. Here's the thing is, I think the greatest threat to artists isn't really obscurity, but finding yourself in a position where you can no longer do your art. So I think it's important that you not change your life too much. You know, if you see a little bit of cash, you should think of it as your tour support, or think of it as business capital, and sit on it, figure out how that'll help you grow your business. Basically, what not to do, you know, if you get a chunk of change, that's not first and last month's rent on a new apartment, or it's not a car that's too nice to put drums in, that kind of thing.
I think one of the biggest things I see is bands whose success came a lot from innovation. They get way too comfortable and forget that the reason people liked them, and this comes to whether it's marketing or creatively in their art, is they start just sticking with the formula. And I think time and time again we see people get lost by their fans and, you know, stagnant in building up their career by getting too comfortable and no longer doing what people like them for.
I think to add to that, treating your fans poorly.
Yes.
Or stopping doing what you did to make your fans love you. So like going to the merch table after the show.
Yeah.
You're never too big to do that.
That's a great point.
Like little things like that go really, really far.
Yeah, I think we call it kind of believe in the hype. You know, instead of realizing that you're actually the same group of people doing the same thing that you did at the beginning to where you're at now. I mean, we were talking earlier about the Flaming Lips, and I say they still have a van mentality. I mean, they're out in a bus, but they still have that same kind of philosophy of like, well, we remember how it was, and we're fearful of how it could be. So let's keep an even keel about everything. Don't believe your own hype. That's kind of our philosophy about that.
What do you think that an artist should do when their music becomes their primary source of income? Like, what are the first steps? What are the kind of the take-home steps? So you get to that point where you're starting to gain success, and then you realize, okay, this is it. We're touring. This is our main source of income. We don't have anything else. What do you think that they should do? What are the first steps?
Save a lot of money. I think like the worst thing. I used to manage a band called Man Overboard, and I managed them from 0 likes on a social network to when we were making a living. And the first thing is everybody's in such a painful spot when you first start to make a living from your music, because you're now so overextended that you can't have a job anymore, but you're not making enough money to have that apartment. And I think the biggest mistake is not keeping a savings of $10,000, $15,000, because the perfect example of this was the band was, one of them wanted to get married, one of them this. We could have went out $2,000, and then sure enough, winter in Wyoming, trailer goes off the rails, and we're down $10,000. If we hadn't saved, I wouldn't let the payouts go out till past per diems until we had $15,000 in savings. I think there is a big thing that you have to be disciplined and not get a little too crazy too fast once you see those big checks coming in. And a lot like what Joe just said before is, December is a rough month when you're not touring, and you think when you see those checks in April and May, when it first comes on, all of a sudden, your March check's great, but there's no touring income, and you're waiting 3 months to get your publishing checks and all that stuff, and it can be real rough.
You also have the opportunity to quit your job in dramatic fashion. When, You know what I mean? Maybe film it, put it on YouTube or something.
I think you need to surround yourself with good people and people that you trust, people like you. I mean, if you're making like sick money and you want to invest, or making sure that your business manager is aware of what's happening and can kind of help you make the budget. I think a lot of bands aren't the best with spreadsheets, right? And so it's like, get somebody on your team that is.
Well, and to that note, be very pragmatic in how you keep up with stuff. You're not, when you're on the road, I don't care what you're doing, whether you're a manager or in a band or whatever, trying to keep up with receipts and kidding yourself that you're going to do that while you're traveling is not going to happen. So just get a plastic baggie and put your receipts in there. And plastic's important so it doesn't get, when you sweat on it or whatever, they don't, because so many of the receipts now are heat done, right? So if they get wet at all, you can't read the numbers. I'm not joking. So keep your receipts so you have them at the end, and use a I like giving everyone a credit card. I know credit cards are bad in theory, but you pay it off every month, but that way you have a record that way as well. And the IRS has actually kind of switched their philosophy, at least the last audit I had for the Flaming Lips, and I do all the Lips accounting. They were fine with seeing the credit card sheets of the receipts, so that things came in through that. So if we didn't have a hard receipt, as long as it was on the Visa statement and you could explain what it was, they were okay with that. And I know this is mundane, but these are habits to start now. Because if you don't, one day you will be audited and you won't have anything, and then you're going to get a $30,000 bill when you have $15,000 that he told you to save in the bank, and you're going to be screwed. So just always assume that somewhere down the line there's a piper to be paid.
And on that note, you had mentioned also something about a paper journal being a good idea.
Yeah.
That the IRS prefers paper journals to Excel spreadsheets. In your experience with
Yeah,
audit?
I mean, actually, well, I don't really do paper. I mean, I just use the Mac equivalent of Quicken, which is iBank, and just have. I'm at best a glorified bookkeeper who just talks well enough that the IRS will let us get away with stuff. And but as long as you're organized and as long as you have a story, my experience with dealing with audits and stuff is that they listen to that, and they're like, well, why do you need $150,000 worth of balloons?
Yeah, no shit.
And you say, because it makes the show look great.
What exactly are Hulk hands?
And you show them a video of what you do with these balloons, and then they go, oh, I guess you would, if there's 20,000 balloons at your show, I guess you do need that.
I'd like to say too that like if you're fortunate enough to be able to build a team around you, manager, business manager, whatever, it's the biggest mistake you could make is like thinking that they're taking care of things and like not paying attention to what's happening. I think that
Unless you're the Flaming Lips.
I think that some of the most successful artists, independent and otherwise, are really on top of their game business-wise. And like, you know, sure, your manager's great, your business manager's great, but like you need to understand the business and like where your money is being put and spent.
I think there's this kind of thing, I don't know if it's just Americans or what, but we're kind of like, it's not polite to talk about details of money, like you're afraid you're going to upset someone. And don't be. You know, it's your money. You know, if any member of the band came to me today to talk to me about money, I could explain exactly what we've been doing with it and where it is, and it's simple, really.
I every month get the profit and loss thing from our business manager, and I look at it every month.
Yeah.
And I ask questions. I go, what is this? And they usually go, I'm not really sure, but they'll find out, figure it out, get an answer, you know.
I think that also these are all really good points, and one of the best I was always saying, and I saw James Murphy from LCD Sound System say it recently, is that one of the biggest things is knowing that spreadsheet and finding the losses, especially when you first start to make money, because that really is the difference between, you know, a van payment every month when you're just getting there and not, is just figuring out some of the dumb things that your money's going to and where you're not collecting, like, you know, Sound Exchange constantly publishes that thing of that all the artists who haven't signed up for it and they have money in escrow waiting for them. You have to make sure you're getting everything and doing that and looking at all those details and allocating hours that aren't as fun as emailing that person you want to get a licensing deal with. Allocating those hours to look at that spreadsheet is super, super important.
Yeah, that's a good point. So going back to, Kristen, you had mentioned teams. What types of teams do you guys feel like a band should set up when they first get started? Because everybody's like, oh, I need a band manager now.
When they first get started.
And it's like, you have, well, okay, but
they should be their own team when they first get started.
Right. But let's say when they first get started in that transition, I guess.
Well,
what do you feel like are the key members of a team early on?
me?
Yeah. Or everybody. I mean, it's not just you, but you had mentioned teams.
I mean,
so
it's pretty, you know,
everyone's
it hasn't really changed much. It's a booking agent, it's a manager, and it's a, you know, accountant at some point.
Okay.
And a lawyer.
What was that?
And a lawyer. You'll need a lawyer.
It's funny because I think a lot of bands are like, I need a manager, and it's like, why? Managers find you, typically. You have to be doing something, and you have to have done it long enough to know how you want it done. And again, we'll find you, typically. That's how that works.
What do you think is a good way to vet them, to vet managers for artists?
Talk to their clients.
Okay.
I think there's also a thing of what can they tell you that you don't know already. And, you know, I think Krista made a great point that should be expounded upon, is that the manager should, one, find you. You should be doing it yourself beforehand, because also no one wants to work with a band that can't do some sort of management themselves.
Well, you have to do it yourself. No one, I mean, if you're not,
But we all, you know, we're of that I mean, we're not all of the same generation, I'm sure, but like, you know, we all grew up watching Almost Famous.
Scott's older.
I am the oldest.
We all grew up watching these movies where the myth is that this person finds you and they give you, the record label fairy leaves you a contract, and then they take care of you while you get drunk and jump off a roof into a pool.
It's a movie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then we have to get rid of those myths, and it really is that
Look,
you're doing hard work all day.
I believe the managers, you know, what they bring to the table usually are two things: knowledge of how the industry works and how to be organized, how to help you be better at that. But also, very importantly, are connections. And if they're a young manager, and I just worked at a record store when I met the Flaming Lips, talk about hobby to career. And I became their friend, and eventually became their manager. And at first, this is kind of counterintuitive for me to say this, that connections are important, because at first I had none. But I was not scared to make the cold call. I called everyone. I made calls, and I was very lucky that even though when I started working with the Lips, it was very early in the career, but they were already out there doing shows. They put out a couple indie records, and they were beloved to a certain group of people out there. And I made connections with those people, who in turn told me to make connections with these other people. And then over time, you know, you have, you know, this is really a small industry, and you get to know a core group it's your expanded team in a sense. You know, you get to know a core group of people out there that are going to be able to help your artist do things, and that's something. If it's a newer manager, I would say at least they need to be willing to make those connections and you hear that from them as an artist, that they are doing these things. Like, I tried calling Don Mueller at William Morris Agency or whatever, and I couldn't talk to him, but I talked to his assistant for a year, which will probably be for a really long time, who will probably be an agent next year because the turnover is so quick. So maybe you get an agent that way or something.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you talk about that willingness to figure out how to do it. What are those steps? And I've seen a lot of bands that have, sort of had that friend manager, franager position turn into something good.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And but the key, and this is almost maybe doesn't need to be said, it's so simplistic. Do not assume that being a friend qualifies the person to be the manager. Okay. The person having the most fun at the show, for example, may not be the best candidate. So if you have an opportunity and you decide that's a good idea to take someone on because there's a particular need within the organization that your friend could help with, vet them like you would. Look for those things that your granddad talks about: hardworking, honest, persistent, all those kinds of qualities. Or somebody who has success in a related but different kind of field or something like that, and organization is a huge thing. Someone who can help you develop some kind of a plan, I think, is ultimately really
Well, at first, when I first started working with the Lips, someone at Warner Brothers actually was the first one to say, would you be interested in being their manager? And I was like, well, what do I know? And they're like, well, distribution. There were so many elements of the music business that you learn working at a record store or running a club or doing something, that it gives you a foothold in becoming a good manager. Mm-hmm. And that's something, to me, I would say you're looking for if it's a younger person. And then you've got the other side where the big time manager comes in, and that's a whole other list of questions to ask.
Yeah, right.
Do either of you, either with the Lumineers or with your other bands, or with your experience with Bosstones or with Flaming Lips, have you run into the sense that the artist lets you choose who the people are? Like, have you run into this idea that the artist chooses the team around the manager, or the manager chooses the team for the artist? What do you think is the best way to interact with that?
I think that the artist always has to be responsible for making those kinds of decisions, and a good manager, I think, advises and gives you a sense of the options. I guess I'd say
Okay.
There are people who really don't want to know about the small details. I don't really care who my business manager is. You're going to be working with them, and so having a trusting relationship with your manager, I think people are willing to let go of a certain amount of control over that stuff. I've always been interested. I've been with my manager for probably 8 years. I've been with my booking agent for nearly 20 years. So these are important relationships, friendships as well.
Yeah, it really depends on the position that you're talking about. Tour manager is going to be a very band decision because we're not on the road with them as much.
Sure.
But business manager, booking agent, it's people I deal with every day, and they're going to know them, they're going to know who they are, but ultimately that's usually our decision. And again, you inform them of the options and say this is what we think is the right way to go, and listen to them.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to this is there's an element of it depends on where the band's at in their career. With the younger bands, with the baby bands, sometimes I like for them to be far more involved on a day-to-day basis with most of the aspects of their career, so they can, one, learn how much they should appreciate all the things I do for them.
Yeah.
But also, so when I say a name, they know who it is and they know what that person's about.
Yeah.
And I think that's early on. But switching to someone like I've worked with the Flaming Lips for 25 years, most of the people that deal on the Flaming Lips at a Warner Brothers Records or whatever, they pretty much deal with me and until they're physically in the room with the band or whatever. But so it kind of shifts a little bit.
It's really important as an artist that you allow your manager to have the power that you're expecting them to have.
Yeah.
Nothing is worse than letting somebody go around your manager, or as soon as you do that, your manager, like their their power meter just starts dropping. You know what I mean? And
Or if you're
so
that-
if you want them to be that person for you, like you have to empower them to be that person for you.
Yeah, we have had a situation where in another band, but it was just kind of like one of the band members like wanted to be the guy and make those decisions, and he got himself into like a lot of conversations, and just ended up burning all of these bridges as a result, because he ended up getting really overwhelmed with like all of the industry talk that these people were giving to him. And it was like early on, and they were just like, "Oh, you're right. I don't want to get involved in those conversations. I'd rather drink a beer with that person, not talk about royalties." You know.
I think there's also a really good point that too with these people, that I think some of the best advice I've always had, and whether it's life or anything, is that the people you do business with also shouldn't just be good at their jobs. They should be people you enjoy talking to and like, because that is a good. I know every time I've had a bad team member relationship, beforehand I knew it was going to go wrong because the person rubbed me wrong, and they were, you know, on my smarmy meter, they were going into the red, and or something like that. And you usually see somebody's true colors, and I think it's important for the band to meet them, because that's another set of vetting too, and that you should all feel comfortable. Like, I've never said yes to managing a band or doing a long-term project with any band unless I've talked with them or Skyped with, you know, if I record a band from Belgium, I Skype with them because I have to sit in a room with them for 2 months. I want to make sure we don't hate each other for 2 months, and I usually have good relationships because of that.
There's one other element I'd like to mention, is that people like artists to like them. So they will tell you, as an artist, whatever they think you want to hear. And it's not really a lie. It's more just, I want you to like me because I like you as an artist. And the manager or whomever, road manager, whoever is on that team member, they can be a person that someone can be completely honest with. And that is incredibly valuable, because especially the bigger the artist gets, once again, it's not like people are being malicious or anything negative. They just
I don't want to hurt people's feelings, and you can't say that to the artist.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
There's certain things you can't say to the artist that you really, someone on your team needs to know, and you let your manager, instead of saying, "Hey, you know what? I don't think these songs are any good." You know, the manager may choose to say, "Yeah, they're into it. I think we should work on it a little bit more." That's code for your record sucks.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah.
Never been there before.
I haven't.
How do you think, how does, well, I don't know, any of you can answer this. How do you feel an artist can keep success from negatively affecting their art? So once they start getting more into these business aspects of what they're doing, hiring managers, hiring team, focusing on spreadsheets, those types of things, receipts and baggies and such, how do they keep going artistically? Or what do you think as managers helps them?
The team is there to give the artist freedom to spend more time on their art, and then as long as you're honest with them, in a positive way, you know, then the art shouldn't change. And maybe, you know, just because it's different down the line doesn't mean it's good or bad. It just means it's different. So once again, it goes back to not believing your own hype and then thinking that anything you do is great.
I think the people who struggle with this oftentimes are the ones who success comes sort of quickly.
Yeah.
You know, I think people who are groups, we were fortunate enough that we didn't really have real success until we were about 5 albums in and, you know, 3 albums deep in a major label deal, and we had toured and built a fan base, and we had a hit on the radio, and we all still lived together in a crappy rental house that my mom owned, you know, and like we were on tour so much, you know, that like our lives didn't change for a long time. And I think that, you know, it's good when you can kind of maintain those friendships, let those friendships be what they've always been, and you know, picking the right team, surrounding yourself with people who really know you and who you can call friends and who can call bullshit on you. You know what I mean? I think is really kind of an important thing.
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
One of the things I see that also is very bad as a producer that I've gotten in the trouble with is once the band starts to get the success or that album gets big, is that a lot of the problem is they get trapped in that they haven't written a song in the year and a half.
Yeah.
And you gotta always stay writing. I know it's not the funnest thing to sit in the back of the van with GarageBand in your lap and a guitar at once while you're drummer's feet are in your face to write a song, but you can't stop writing or else you're going to have a lot of trouble. Like writer's block, as somebody who's written 6,000 blog posts and worked on thousands of songs, it's because you forget who you were when you wrote those songs and it doesn't feel the same to you. That's really just the feeling of it, and you got to find a way to do it.
Great point.
I think the biggest fear is like losing touch. You know, I always try to think of Jay-Z like trying to get out of a parking garage, you know, like using one of those things. And I feel like when you like lose touch, you like, you know, forget how to do the little shit if you get like really big. But it really comes down to like some life shit, you know. It's like surround yourself with good people, people that you trust, people that are gonna call bullshit on you. It's like your life shouldn't change that much if you're getting famous or whatever that is.
Except you can buy more stuff.
And who needs more stuff though, you know? It's like,
Oh, I do. I love stuff.
Lots of toy soldiers.
I collect records, yeah. The soldier thing's a lie, but the records is real. I think, you know, the great thing about our business really is, you know, going back to the hobby to musical career, I think it's one of the few businesses that people really do it because they love it. I know plenty of lawyers that don't love being lawyers, but I don't know anyone in the music business who doesn't love music, and that's something to cherish and really be, you know, to consider any time we're dealing with people in here. And there might be times when I get mad at the record label or an idea they have or whatever, but really it's always for the right reasons, and which is a rare thing in any business. So we're very lucky that that happens, you know. I don't know why I said all that, but
No, that's great.
That was great.
Thank you. This one's more of a tough question, but I'd be curious what any of you think about it. What are some suggestions you think that for artists to deal with those around them who might treat them differently if they start changing? If there's
Fire them immediately.
Changing? What if they're friends, family, those types
Fire
of
them
things?
immediately.
Not just
fire the family.
like the people asking for tickets and stuff, like
Yeah,
hangers
exactly.
on.
Exactly. People are like, hey, you gave me guest list spots, but you're not giving me guest list spots anymore. Or, hey, you know, come to my party. Oh, you're not coming to my party, jerk. Got a big head now. I mean, are there sorts of things that you've seen?
You have to surround yourself with good people. You have to surround yourself with people that are going to call you on your shit. And I mean, I think everybody who has a certain amount of success will have some hangers on, and like, I think those people, you can see them from a mile away, and I don't think you should feel bad about saying no. I don't think you should feel bad about asking people to pay for your shows. It's how you make a living. You know?
There's a good precedent, like I learned from a producer I learned under, is like when a band comes to me, they pay me. When I go to their show, I don't, if it's sold out, I might ask for the guest list, but I'll buy a t-shirt, but I pay for their show, and we keep one part of this professional and one part of this friendly. If we're out at a bar just hanging out, I'm happy to buy a round of beers because we're friends at that point, but when it's the professional thing, I try to keep that different.
You can just add that line in your bio that's like, if you have to ask if you're on the guest list, you're not on it, you know? It's kind of like an understood thing with our bands. It's like,
Sure.
just don't send me that email. Just
Right.
show up if you care, and they will. I mean, we will. We all pay for shows. We all do those things.
Have you run into, while managing bands, having to advise people to say, okay, look, I mean, obviously the guest list conversation is a constant one.
Oh, yeah.
How do you advise bands to deal with that? What do you tell them to say? Hey, sorry.
I put it on our tour manager. I make Mike deal with it.
Well, you know, once again, there's levels here of where a band's at in their career and whatever, but ultimately there reaches a point where if you have a certain number of people on your guest list, you're paying for it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's money out of your pocket. Now, if the artist is willing to pay for it, then I don't really argue with it, but I make them pay for it.
I'm seeing a lot of bigger acts right now. Adele, when she went out last.
Oh, yeah, they don't.
A couple of others that just no guest lists
Yeah,
at all.
they'll give you
Yeah.
tickets, but you have to buy them.
Yeah,
I mean, you can
it's
get on the.
it's pretty cool. It's something I think I might do on the next big tour we have. You know, it's thousands and thousands of dollars at some point.
Sure.
Yeah.
Adds up. Every little bit adds up on that.
But I mean, at the local level, again, it's hundreds of dollars at that point. You usually get 5 to 10 spots, right? It's like,
Right.
it's your mom.
We have hundreds of people on our list every time we play Boston, and I have to say that I'm always glad to see those folks, and I feel willing to pay for it. You know, I'm more worried about the bands who are trying to build tour history in the beginning of their career, and if you can't show a promoter that you're worth 150 tickets
Right.
because half the people are on your guest list, that's when it's really sort of negatively impacting an artist, I think, in the beginning. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what I do in our hometown, I try as often as possible. If we're playing, it's either an extremely inexpensive ticket for a Flaming Lips show, like $10 or something, and then we're like, why really you need on the guest list? I arranged for all 10,000 of you. I mean, our guest list in Oklahoma, when we do our New Year's Eve shows, we've done 4 of them in a row, and each year was like, the first year was 1,000, second year was 2,000, third year was like just anyone, but there were a few people that paid enough to where we could pay for the room or whatever, but it was ultimately a free show for the people that, in our sense, were very supportive early in our career. It's giving back. But you can't do that in LA. You can't do that in New York because you're using those tickets to bring journalists in or whatever, as much as possible to promote your events. So there's a limit to what you can do with friends,
I feel like we kind of derailed on the guest list thing, but it's an interesting tie-in to this like ultimate entitled consumer. Like right now we have consumers that aren't buying music, obviously. It's the least your friends could do is pay $12 to see you. Sure. It means so much. I mean, it means so much to sell out the High Dive in Denver to the 5 surrounding tour markets. You sell out Seattle, Vancouver knows about it, Bellingham knows about it, Portland knows about it. And it's like, if it's a friend situation, it's like, dude, this is how I make my living. Like, I'm not coming to your work. I'm not asking you for free phones or whatever the fuck they're doing. Like, it's how you make a living. And it's like, they should want you to be successful. They should want to spend $10.
Right. Yeah, as long as the bands don't go into the bar and say, can I have a free beer or can I have a, there's a little bit of times, you'll see that where I think people have the perception that artists get so much free stuff that why won't they be able to do it for someone else as well? And I know it's, once again, it's levels, when you're at a 200 capacity room, it's a little bit different or whatever. But, there's still a strange psychology. I mean, earlier you mentioned taking care of your fans. Some people, that's to them, they feel like they deserve it. It's tough. It really is. Maybe you just have a meet and greet room that they buy a ticket, but they get a special area they can be at or something like that. We've done those kinds of things before.
Yeah, those are great.
One of the interesting things I saw was talking about the support thing with when people think that you're doing so well is when Man Overboard, when we were just a DIY band, we would get those name your own price things on Bandcamp, and we'd constantly get $40 donations all the time. The second we signed one of the largest indies in America, never got a $5 name your own price again.
Never. The disconnect between, where you're actually at in a van, five records in, and what that reality is, and like what your fans and friends think
perceive,
is. It just increasingly does this, right?
Yeah. Any thoughts on how to bridge that?
No, I mean, we signed a baby band, 6 months ago. The record's coming out in June, and the way that their friends and stuff are treating them in Madison, Wisconsin, it's like they call me and it's these therapy sessions you have, and they're just like, oh, everybody thinks we're such a big deal now, and I'm like, you haven't even recorded yet. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
The disconnect becomes increasingly bigger, and the only way to bridge the gap is to surround yourself with people who know what's going on and like know you and care about you, the person, not the lead singer.
Right.
I think the special way not to bridge the gap is to be the person who complains on Twitter about it all day, which I've had the problem of having to shut that down before too. That's
the
even
complaining,
worse.
the complaining.
Well, just
on
like
the
I'm so
microphone.
poor, I can't even afford to take my girlfriend out, and the people that destroys a mystique about this. And I do buy into that thing that fans want to see you living a good life, but they also don't want to hear the complaints about what you're not.
I thought about that too. Yeah, there's been a lot of different articles over the past year where people have been saying, "Oh yeah, thanks to Spotify, we're only making this much. We're stuck in a studio apartment, et cetera, et cetera." And there's those two aspects of it because of how we view money in society. That one aspect of it is like, "Oh man, I need to go buy their shirt. I need to go to their shows." The other aspect is like, there's kind of a popularity thing that seems to decline. If you feel like a band's huge and then all of a sudden you find out they're broke, it changes it a little bit.
It reminds me, a few years ago, Wayne's thing, when he talked to someone, one of the first questions he would ask is, how much money do you make? Just to have that feeling of uncomfortableness in a way. And then someone would ask him and be like, well, last year I made this much. And he would tell them, but he would, especially record label people, he'd be like, how much money do you make?
Yeah.
and you know, meet the president of Warner. But how much money do you make? You know, $7 million. Wow, that's a lot. You know, and people inevitably always try to be like, well, I do okay. And it's like, that's not an answer, you know. There is this, once again, talking about money is just at times really uncomfortable for people. And one thing that's been great about the Flaming Lips and working with Wayne and the guys is we, for whatever reason, we've gotten over that, you know, so it's easy to do this. I mean, I think Wayne, if anyone asked him about anything, he would tell them, you know. So. So how much do you make? No.
All of you, one by one. Just kidding.
Or combined, add it up and tell me. I'd be more impressed, I'm sure.
This is a more random question, but at what point did all of you feel that the bands you're working with should make the transition from just being on a van to going into a bus? It's kind of
well, we were an 8-piece, so we were really ready to go.
That's right. 8-piece ska band,
and we wore suits, so it was really the wardrobe
like
required.
suit
We
up
get
here.
a trailer. Half our trailer was always suits, but man, I couldn't get there quick enough. You know, we were really dangerous. It's dangerous. It's dangerous. You don't want to drive from Denver to Salt Lake in December. Believe me, you know. Or going over to Idaho from Seattle or whatever. You know, it's brutal. You know, it's a dangerous thing. But we knew for us, it reached a point when it couldn't be avoided. I think we went to Europe and we were fortunate enough to be on a bus. The first time we were on a bus, we loved it so much that we wouldn't go into the hotel. We loved the bus so much. Like, we had this thing, it was like, never leave the mothership. And like that's where the beer was.
It becomes that way.
everything,
I mean, it becomes
you know?
that way on a bus, yeah.
We did the van for years, you know, and we were a hard partying band, and we're lucky that we had an opportunity to get into a bus. You know, it's a numbers crunching thing. You know, a bus roughly, you know, $1,000, $1,200 a day, maybe. Like, once you start talking about the driver rooms
depending
and all
on
that
the
kind of
level.
stuff. Is
Yeah.
that close?
Yeah.
You know, it's been a while since I've had to crunch the numbers on a bus, but you know, it's a numbers game. What does it cost you to get the rooms? What is the sleep and rest and peace of mind ultimately worth? If you're a band that has a busy schedule of promotion and stuff like that, and you're going to be expected to do a radio thing at 7 a.m. when you arrive into Chicago and stuff, it's like the rest that you can get is really invaluable. It's hard to put it.
That's what we did. We the Lumineers had a meeting about it. It was like 4 hours long, and it was us and the label, and it became a numbers game. We were starting to react at radio, and it was 3 radio appearances a day before a show, you know, or 2 in an in-store. It was like a lot of that daytime stuff, and we were able to play more shows and, you know, get from place to place, but it was really about the rest. It was like lead singer can't drive all day and, you know, do all that and then go do 3 appearances and play 3 times that day. It became about sleep. And it wasn't, you know, we were reacting at radio. We had to go and service a lot of stations every time we went somewhere, and it became about rest.
So I'm kind of hearing if it's financially feasible and you're really busy, just do it.
We had the total opposite experience. The boys were so excited. They like researched the van, bought the van, used the van for 2 months, and sold the van. It was real fast, but it was wild.
I should also point out there is also now these green vans that are kind of the transition before you really need the bus, that, you know, you can kind of like, I see a lot of time 2 bands split them, and it's the $600 a day instead of the $1,200 a day type of thing. So there is even a step in between if that is something that you're at.
What is that, like a bus?
They're small, like half-size van, halfway between a van and a bus, but it has the bunks like the bus, and much cheaper.
That's punk rock.
Yeah.
That is. That's
And
interesting.
it's sprinters and splitters
Yeah.
and all that. You know, I mean, really it comes down to routing and money. You can do more if you have a bus, and but doing more only matters if it actually makes you the money to be able to have the bus.
Right.
I would never take tour support for a bus because you'll never ever have any money. So, and tour support's a big thing. You know, the Flaming Lips were lucky. Even early in their careers, we've always been very thrifty. We bought a van. You know, they, you know, had that forever. Even when it finally went away and we started renting a van, that was a big decision too, of like renting a van versus buying another one. And you know, all of those, you know, they're great questions, and the scenario is different for every artist. You know, sometimes you're playing enough, you can afford to buy a van, then it obviously becomes worth more prorated in a sense, but then you got to upkeep them. And we found that a lot of times when you're putting 100,000 miles on a van in a month or two, the value of the van goes down, and you start spending a lot more money on upkeep than you were renting one and having a new van every 3 weeks when you go out on the road. So it's subtle differences, but those are things to consider.
So here's another question that I didn't give you guys beforehand, but I'm going to ask you now. So thinking about it's more South by Southwest appropriate in a sense. So alcohol, drinking, those types of things that come up.
Do you have any?
He likes it.
In the music industry.
You admitted earlier.
In the music industry, how do you feel bands should deal with that? What's the advice you give to other bands when they're getting to that point? They're starting to make this a living. I mean, you know, what are the suggestions you have for pacing themselves? Those types of things.
Well, I don't want to bum anyone's South by Southwest buzz, but I quit drinking 20 years ago because of the hard partying was a little too hard, you know, and that was a decision that, you know, we wanted to build our career, and for us, that was something that needed to happen in order for us to do that. So I didn't pace myself. I did all my drinking young. You weren't around. I did your share of drinking too.
Thanks, man.
So,
Appreciate that.
So yeah, but I think it's really important that health and sanity and safety, and as soon as these things start to, I think, talk about negatively affecting the art. I mean, I think that we should consider the substance issue as alongside with the money issue, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that can be a big drain on your health and sanity and just the well-being of the band and the happiness of the group and all that kind of stuff. So.
It's just some life shit. I mean, there's a definition of binge drinking. Look it up. Don't do it, or do it sparingly. It's also like if you're just in a van and there's 8 of you, like that hangover is gonna suck for everybody. Like I think it's some consideration if you're in a van about who you're with and what you're doing, and it's about life. It's not about being on stage and being wasted.
Right.
Sadly, I'll also say, though, that there is the thing, though, that the bands who can hang out with other bands well, and that doesn't mean you have to drink or get stoned to do it, but that does a lot for going far in your early career. There's a lot of bands I produced that I'm like, you guys are a great band. You're never going anywhere because you can't hang out with anybody. You're all too introverted weirdos, and you're just like, it's never going to work. And that I can't predict what people are going to like for songs. I can predict that the second I sit in a room with a band for a week. I can just say, you're never going to work this socially.
I produced a record for a band, and the drummer, like everyone just loved this kid. He was like the connection to everybody, and they got incredible tours just because people liked hanging around with this one guy in the band.
That happens all the time.
It's
it really
huge.
is the case.
How do you get on support
And
tours?
it's usually the drummer too.
Yeah, that's right. If you're calling the agent looking for the opening slot, you're really calling the wrong person.
Yeah.
You had mentioned with the Lips that you started out being his friends, working at a record store, moving through that whole transition. I know you've been with the Lumineers since they started, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever get? What do you feel like a band should do while they're going along that path? Did you ever worry maybe they're going to choose somebody else? Maybe I need to watch my back. Has that ever become a worry for you guys?
It was pretty weird with us. We signed to an incredible label in Nashville called Dual Tone, pretty small organization, and when we started doing the thing, which is so abnormal and happens once in a lifetime, all these labels were calling us like, who are these guys? And come over here, and like managers were calling them, doing the same thing. It comes back to what I've been saying all day. It's just like surround yourself with good people. And were we ever worried? No, I mean, you come in for the big shows, you do what you have to do, you trust the people around you, you trust that they trust you. But those guys are scumbags.
You have to give people the opportunity to grow with you to that next thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's such a common story. It happened with us too. Like where a label is encouraging us to meet with their friends about being our manager, and you just can't do that, you just can't. The managers, if things are happening for you, the label's saying, well, your manager doesn't have enough juice. It's not true, because the juice comes from things happening well for you.
Right.
A lot of the manager's power comes from the artist saying, this is who our manager is. So I think that's important.
Right. What about you, Scott?
Oh, you know, the Lips and I are like family and
Right.
have been very, very close early on in their career. And there definitely have been days when you get in a fight and you think, well, that's it, I'm going to get fired. And I'll be like, Wayne, are you going to fire me? And he's like, why would you say that? So I've been lucky that there's never been that moment when I was that fearful. I'm more fearful of the day when people don't want to listen to us anymore.
Yeah.
We always have that kind of, I think that's part of the reason why the Lips have been as successful as they have, is we've never as an entity, as a group, between the business side and the artist side, ever fallen into the position where we believe that people are just always going to listen to us. I think our attitude is always, well, at some point they're going to stop. How do we make it last a little bit longer, or keep going? And you know, and ultimately it comes down to just, you know, making great art. And then my job as the manager is to help figure out a way for the great art to connect to people, whether it's chocolate skulls with an embedded USB drive in it. You know, that in itself is interesting. But what made it work was that Wayne was willing to get in a van and take it to record stores himself and sell it, and do in-stores that lasted for 9 hours, where he's just signing everything that people want. And then, yeah, you get 10 people to buy a $350 chocolate skull out of the 3,000 people he met that day. So have I had a fear of being fired? No. I think most other managers probably look at the Lips and are like, who would, oh my gosh, they're crazy, you know?
Those guys
How
are
could I
great.
work with that?
Those
you
guys
know?
are great.
That's awesome. Well, I think you guys have anything else you want to add before we go to Q&A? No? Okay, perfect. So let's go ahead and get some questions here. Oh, perfect. You've got a microphone.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Brendan. Oh, that's loud. I had sort of two questions for you all. One, you were talking about not being afraid to ask, you know, how much money someone makes or something like that. I was wondering, you know, for one, when you approach a club or venue or something as a musician, and like I'm just getting started myself, and to say, because, you know, a couple of years ago when I wasn't having to pay any bills, that was great. I could just, I'll play for whatever. But now I actually have rent. And so it's like, you know, to say, you know, oh, by the way, yeah, we'd love to play, you know, this, by the way, how much do you pay us? And, you know, is there kind of a tactful way to go about asking that?
Are you talking to the buyer of the club?
Yeah, whoever would be booking us as a band.
My favorite method with a developing band is to say, how do you want to work payment? Kind of puts it in their court a little bit. But you should also know like what you need to clear at the end of the night. Like if you need $500, you can say like, how do you want to work payment? I really would like to see us make this amount. Is that, you know, reasonable?
Okay.
I think just honesty and succinctness will get it done.
And also knowing where you're at. I mean, have you played in a club before you know what I'm saying? It's
Right.
like, if this is your first gig, you don't want to go say, I want $500.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you have to know where you are in your local scene and what value you potentially have, and then I usually knock it down from there. If I really believe a band's worth $500, I'll say, well, let's do, you know, whatever, $300 and do some points or something where the venue feels like they potentially could earn some money. But at your level, most likely they're just worried about selling beer. So, you know, just say, you know, when you're just first starting out, a door deal might suck for you potentially, but it makes you want to help people get there, which is what the bar wants mostly.
My favorite deal for developing artists is the versus deal, you know, so like $250 versus a percentage of the door. And it's a really common developing band deal.
How does that work?
They give an option of, you know, you'll get paid at least $250 or 50% of the door after whatever. So
Okay,
it's
so like if you
whichever
if there's
one's
enough
more.
that's more that
Exactly.
Then you take more.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's all about tickets. How many bodies can you put in? You know, it's really not that. People don't understand. I called the club and they don't call me back. It's like you haven't, you know, a lot of times artists don't give a club a reason to call them back. There should be a mutually beneficial relationship. and your fans allow you to create that value that will make a talent buyer or an agent want to do something with you, you know? So really focus on the fan thing. A lot of times, bands have to sort of do these non-professional shows, you know, build something up where you rent the venue or you do the house parties, or, you know, then you have something to talk about. You know, hey, last time we did the VFW, we brought 150 kids in. I could probably get 80 to show up for the show. That's what they want to know.
I'll also say that overplaying a market is the worst thing you can do as a developing artist. Like, it happens in Seattle all the time. These bands are playing 5 times a month. It's like every show you play has to be an event. You have to give your friends a reason to pay $10. They're not going to pay $10 5 times in a month. They'll do it once every 6 weeks, maybe, if you're lucky. If they're good friends.
I think it's also important that's
the oversaturation thing, it drives me insane.
I think that's number one. And then number 2 is playing the right places. Like, so for example, in New York, there's Bowery Presents, and they're a magnet system. And so you start off playing Mercury Lounge, and if you do well there, they bump you up to an opening act at Bowery Ballroom. You do well there, you're now playing to 3,500 people at Terminal 5 as an opening act. Playing the right venues and the venues that the other promoter looks at. So the other thing too is I was a concert promoter for 3 years, and I looked at 2 other venues, and that's where I got all my opening bands for, because that's where all the bands were playing that would be any good for our venue.
I mean, just always look at whatever it is. If it's you're trying to get a gig, or you're trying to get a record deal, or you're trying to get a publish, whatever it is you're trying to get from someone, look at it from their perspective and figure out why would they want to give you anything. And once you have that why, and you know a little bit about them, do your research. Find out what kind of bands have played there, who's been successful. Explain why you're similar to that or whatever. And if you're not, get similar to the bands that are successful there. But everything I've done throughout my whole career, I've always put myself in the other person's shoes before I had that conversation with them. And just being a great band isn't good enough ever.
No.
Lots of great bands. Lots of crappy bands who think they're great bands. So just always think about it from that person who you're pitching, no matter what the pitch is for, from their perspective.
What can you do for them?
Cool. Thank you.
Hey, I'm Dave Ratner. Thank you all for being here. I'm curious how you guys deal with, I won't call it band politics, band chemistry, right? So if I talk to an artist, there's 5 guys in the band, they're not all going to agree on everything. And there's probably one that's going to be louder. Do you listen to the louder one? Do you put them out of the room and listen to everybody else? How do you figure out?
That's a really good question.
I try.
What's up, Dave?
That wasn't planted. That
was not a plan. Yeah.
That was random. We just know.
I think everybody's different, obviously. Your band was big.
Yeah.
Did everybody have a role, or were some people just like completely checked out and they just followed along, or how did that work?
Honestly, I mean, I did, you know, and I still continue to do a lot of the kind of stuff with input from everybody. So we allow people to do their thing that they're good at.
Right.
I think, you know.
It's so hard. I think, you know, we've got a big band now, and they're babies, and they're just coming up, and you're starting to see them, which roles they want to take. And I think if you've got a lead singer who wants to be the lead singer and wants to make all the choices, then you kind of go with that, right, as a manager. I think you let everybody kind of show you what they want to do, and be as involved as they want to be, and try to foster that in them, you know. Yeah, I think that's the short answer.
Okay, so there's a couple ways to look at it. I mean, one, any band that I've worked with over the years, Flaming Lips to whomever, you know, I always like having one person that I can talk to, and I know that they speak for the band. Like, it's their job to go chat with everyone else at rehearsal or whatever about whatever it is that I'm going to them with. Because if I have to chase down between 3 to 5 members to get and have that conversation, I mean, there are important decisions where you actually have a group meeting and you sit there and you do that. But ultimately, whatever Wayne wants works pretty well for us. And I mean, that's not fair, though, really, because over the years with a band like the Flaming Lips, everyone does kind of have their area of expertise. Michael, the bass player, has really become a great engineer, and he, we really listen to him when it comes to sound and that. Steven is the ultimate in, a guy who can play every single instrument and is pitch perfect and writes amazing music. You focus on that, and then Wayne is the ultimate frontman. So depending on what we're dealing with, we weigh everyone's opinion, and but I think it's great, especially for newer bands, to have just one person. Every time I take on a new band, I set them down. I'm like, look, I love you all. You can talk to me anytime you want, but I can't. If a decision needs to be made quickly, I can't chase you all down. I want to know which one of you
has a working phone.
That the four of you tell me.
There's usually only one.
That the four of you tell me right now.
Who's got the best phone?
Which one of you has the best phone?
Yeah.
Which one of you will answer the phone? It's not always the best phone. Which one of you will answer the phone 24 hours, 7 days a week, and give me an answer that the rest of you are going to be happy with? And I want you to look at each other right now and tell me.
Yeah.
I think it's also really important that I think every situation is totally different. Like, with two of the bands I was managing a couple of years ago, we set it up that was an absolute democracy. But then with the other one, there's one kid who's a little too stoned to decide how to tie his shoelaces properly. So he didn't really get a vote because he didn't care. And I think you have to say at the beginning, one, I think you do need a member that you just go to for the quick decisions. But anything big, we set out at the beginning, we wrote a Google Doc and we said, all votes on this type of thing have to be democratic. All these have to be unanimous. Like, when we chose a record label, we wouldn't settle until it was a unanimous vote. And there was always one guy out on a couple records labels that approached us.
I think a democracy can only work if there's odd numbers of people in a band. If it's even, it won't work very well.
The way I set it up with the odd-numbered one, I wasn't part of the decision, and with the even one, I was the tiebreaker if it was a tie.
Yeah, we've got that too.
So we've
ahead of you there.
Yeah, I like it. I like
So we
writing this down.
probably got time for one or two more. How long do we have? One more? Okay.
Hi. Great seminar. Thank you. My name is Dom. Quick question. With my group band, per se, I do a lot of, it's pretty much independent based, and me and another person are pretty much the facilities and the talent management, all the whole overall audio engineering, videography, producing. Now, involved in that, I'm also looking for the aspects of touring, not necessarily touring, booking gigs like you guys said. You guys said earlier that you kind of want to know where your place is when you want to go make these deals and stuff. And I'm kind of figuring out, as new artists that have a semblance of organization and want to book shows, should they go the full professional route, as in like press kits, manager, promotion, or can they really just do this themselves as
Where
an
do you live?
independent? Woodbridge, Virginia.
Do you hang out at the 930 Club ever?
No.
Black Cat?
I've been to DC probably 3 or 4 times in
You
the
should
last.
start hanging out in the clubs that you want to play at.
Okay.
See who's playing there. See
Okay.
what the ticket price is. You'll eventually meet somebody who works there.
Right.
And just get in their ear.
Because like you guys said, talking to an agent is not going to be your
Agents
best.
will find you.
Yeah.
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 You want to talk to promoters, club owners.
Yeah, I mean, you want to hang out at the club. You want to,
Okay.
I mean, if for no other reason, you'll start getting free tickets, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you want to hang out there. You want to meet those people. You want to see who's coming in. You want to see what the ticket price is and see who's bringing people in. Once you get, that relationship and you like lock down your hometown, you got DC on lock, you're going
Yeah.
to get to Philly, you're going to get to Jersey, you're going to get to all those places.
Okay.
Well, this is something, students come to talk to me all the time. I run a school as well, and I'm sure you probably have the same scenario. They ask these type of questions, and the first thing I always do your research. Look at artists that you want to emulate, and look at how they started, and just steal all those ideas.
But, in terms of press kits and stuff, like if you're starting to send emails to talent buyers, just short and sweet, man. Don't attach any MP3s. Give me somewhere where I can stream and tell me what's going on. Hey, we opened for so-and-so. I brought in 50 people to this open mic. Like, I think I can do it here, You've got a lot of resources in Woodbridge and DC. It's like there's just so many good clubs down there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To that point as well, the internet has made this really easy too, and I see with a lot of the bands I work with, like, be a part of your genre's SoundCloud group. every micro genre has a SoundCloud group now. You could be Balkan dubstep, and there's still going to be a SoundCloud group for that. There's going to be a Facebook group for it. There's going to be that. Be a part of that community, because all those people who are in that community, a Reddit subreddit, all the people who are talking there and socializing there every day are all the people who are going to be in big groups. And if you're friends with them, they're going to pick you up and put you as the opening act. It's never been easier than before to socializing while you're online for one of these shows on those message boards right now.
I do want to say that I think bands spend too much time on the internet.
Totally.
I agree with you on that, but I would say not too much time doing the wrong things.
Well, like nice Facebook likes, who cares?
I'd rather have 100 actual fans than thousands of these half-interested virtual fans.
Yeah.
Unless you have 1 million.
Thank you.
Well, then, when I worked at Side One and I was doing A&R and we'd look at bands. At that time, it was MySpace, and you'd see bands that have hundreds of thousands of friends, but no gigs.
No gigs.
Not a one.
Yeah. It's always a combination of all of these things that make it work. And for some artists, the digital world is more important than for others. And playing live, if you're not a great live band, don't play a lot of live shows.
Yeah.
Find your strengths and then focus on those areas, and go from there.
It's an all of the above sort of thing.
Yeah.
Is what it
Well,
is.
if the members of the band are really great looking, then make sure you have really awesome photos of them. If not, make sure they're blurry. I mean, and don't push that side of it. I mean, as an artist what your strengths are, and you want to. Early in your career, nothing's going to be given right to you, right? So you just have to find that one jagged edge and just keep climbing up, and people ask me what do managers do. A manager, I believe, our main job is to recognize opportunities that are worth following through on, and that should be our area of expertise. You need to do that for yourself at first, and because you know what are the right things for you at this point, and no one else does.
And you need to meet. You need to meet the people in your community that will make it happen with you, not for you, but with you, because the buyers in DC know everybody all over the country, and as soon as you're selling out their room, they're calling Philadelphia, they're calling New Jersey, and they're like, "Yo, this kid's legit. He started hanging out here and wouldn't go away, and we finally gave him a gig." It's like, it's a really, really small community, as we've talked about, but start in your backyard, and developing that buzz in your backyard is huge.
And remember, other artists are, those are not your adversaries. These are your friends. This is your community. There's a lot of competition, I think, with young groups, and oftentimes people get wrapped up in their own ego, and you should be building connections and trying to get in the community.
I think
that's huge.
To Scott's point too, what he said that the strengths and weaknesses, that's one of the biggest things. When I first started working with the band, I'd always have a Google Doc of my work that I had to be done when I'd have time to work on them. And at the top of it, I put what our strengths were and what our weaknesses, and every day I would try to get rid of the weaknesses and build upon those strengths and keep it at the top of my mind. Like every day I'm reminded of this. What can I do to capitalize on these opportunities, and what makes sense? How do you maximize that? That's the perfect point. And figuring that out is huge.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for your questions.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. I'd like to thank South by Southwest. I'd like to thank all of you for attending, and of course, our wonderful panelists.
Thank you, Josiah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.